Alrighty, let's have a quick look at AutoLayout. So very often in Figma, you will have a bunch of rectangles like this. Let's make them 100 times 100. And you will lay them out in some design like this. And you can use these layout tools to align them nicely, tidy it up, give them a consistent spacing and so forth. And that's quite common and quite good. And if you want to add a new one, the grid guides are pretty good and helpful, so it's not that big of a pain. But Figma also has this automated layout system called AutoLayout, which helps you create consistent layout behaviors, similar to like flexbox in CSS, or the, what's it called in Swift? The stacks, I think, where you just like set up, this is how this stack behaves, and this is how each item should behave inside that stack, which can be helpful, especially when you're creating reusable components. You can have a little layout system in there that automatically adapts to the content. So that's what AutoLayout does. And so to get started, we just select these rectangles, and AutoLayout is suggested out here. So let's press the plus button. And now they are all wrapped in an AutoLayout component. And so AutoLayout can be laid out in different directions. So right now it detected that these appear to be horizontal, so it set it to horizontal here, but you can also set it to vertical like this. If you change the size of the container, by default, they're just going to overflow. But you have this wrap option here, so that they automatically wrap. And already we have this pretty nice responsive layout here. For any AutoLayout container, you can set the spacing both horizontally and vertically. So maybe you want something like this, or maybe you want in the other direction these guys to be tight, but a little bit more spacing between each row. So let's say this is 18 and this to 4. This is like a pretty common grouping when you have cards like this. You want them to be a little bit closer horizontally, but I'll have a little spacing vertically, something like that. Yeah, you have more options like padding, for instance. So the spacing is what's the spacing in between each of these items, but you can also add padding on the sides of this entire thing. So that's the padding right here, and on the top of the bottom and the bottom, you can set the padding like that. And you can even, if you want to go super granular, say like on the right side, I want some extra padding here on the AutoLayout thing. So that's the spacing in between the items and the paddings on the side of all these things. You can also choose how you want to align the things in the container. So you can set, let's make this a little bit bigger, like this. So right now they're left aligned and top aligned. But let's say you increase the size of the AutoLayout container. Then you can say like, hey, center these like that, or up in the corner, or center it both vertically and horizontally, to the right, to the bottom right, to the bottom left, etc., etc. So this is also quite useful if you want to create like maybe some Netflix style cards. So you like increase the width here, and you add a little border radius, and you want these guys to always be centered at the top like that. And now you have sort of an Apple TV or Netflix style set of cards. So that's the alignment here. I think that's pretty much everything you need to know about AutoLayout. Well, there's one more thing, which is that AutoLayout, if you come across an AutoLayout thing in one of the files that we use, it can be kind of annoying. Like you just want to move something 2 pixels, but suddenly you can't because it uses AutoLayout, right? So it's not just like a thing where you can just move it around in the coordinate system. It's actually constrained by AutoLayout, and that can be frustrating. But what you might remember from when we talked about frames is that frames have their own coordinate system. So quite often what I will do is I will take a rectangle like this, which is like annoyingly constrained by AutoLayout, and I can convert it into a frame. And you won't see the difference, except here in the layer panel where it's now a frame. But the cool thing is, since this frame has its own coordinate system, I can now draw something in here. So let's say that I want to draw a circle here. We can center it in that frame, give it a little Japanese looking logo or color. And now this is inside the frame. So the frame is constrained by AutoLayout, just like before, but the circle inside the frame actually only looks at the frame's coordinate system. So now you can move this guy around relative to that frame. And so this is kind of cool because now you can, let's say that this is a notification badge for this card. We can put it up here, and we can say you're always on the upper right side of this frame, but the frame is still constrained by AutoLayout. So as we move this along, that frame is gonna stick into the right position inside AutoLayout. But this little guy only looks at its parent frame and uses that frame's coordinate system to position itself. So you'll see that quite often when maybe we have a few things laid out using AutoLayout, and then we have an icon, and I want to make a little optical adjustment of that icon, but I still want it to live in the grand scheme of the AutoLayout. So what I'll do is I'll frame that icon inside, well, I'll put it in a frame, because then the icon can be adjusted in that frame coordinate system, but the frame still lives inside AutoLayout. That's a whole lot to take in, so hopefully that wasn't too complex, but I think it's useful just to hear these things and eventually you get the hang of it. One final thing I can mention about AutoLayout is that the order of the layers is how the things get laid out in AutoLayout. So if I move this frame here, it's gonna change inside AutoLayout as well. It's just something to be mindful of, like the layer order matters. But typically I'll just drag things around here inside the canvas. Alrighty, hope that was a helpful intro to AutoLayout. One more thing that is fun to know about AutoLayout is that you can play around a little bit with how individual items behave inside the container. So let me show you what I mean. Let's draw up some rectangles like this, and we can select them and add AutoLayout. And now we have the automated layout system here for these guys. But if you change the size of the AutoLayout container, you'll see that they stay put. And that's because they have a fixed size. But you can change that as you want. So you can say that, actually, this guy, I don't want you to be fixed. I want you to fill the container. And so now he's going to grow to take up the available space. And so we can actually just go in here and reduce the spacing in between each item so it makes more sense. So maybe we'll draw that down to 12 or something. And so these guys have a fixed width, and this guy has a fill. So it's like fill the container as much as you can. And that's really useful when you're designing something like a menu nav item inside rerun. So this will be the toggle, and maybe you add an icon, and this is a spacer. So quite often I will create a hidden layer which has a 0% opacity, and it will just grow here as a hidden little spacer. So I'll give that a name of spacer, and it will take up all the available space, and then I will have the rectangle being pushed out to the right. So that's a little hack you can use in AutoLayout to fill the container, but actually hide the thing that fills the container. And you can use this in different directions as well. So you can say that on the height axis, I want this to fill the container as well, and it will. And now you could say this is quite nice, but I want it to be vertically centered like that. And now we have whatever this design is, but it's fully automated. So if I change the size of this container, it's still going to grow to fill the container, which is really nice. You can do this kind of in the inverse as well. So you can say that I want the AutoLayout container. So I've selected this entire container now. I want it either to be fixed or to hug the contents. So if you have a bunch of items, you can just say that, let's actually add some items. We put an AutoLayout container around them. All right, so we have 4 items here, and we can drag the container to be bigger. And now, because I'm dragging this, Figma interprets that as, okay, well, you want a fixed size for this. So it set the width to fixed. But I can change that back to no, actually hug the contents. So whatever's inside this AutoLayout container, hug the contents here. And same thing in the height, hug the contents. So that's the properties on the container itself. Do you want it to be fixed or to hug the content? And then inside here, you can say, do you want each item to be fixed, or do you want it to fill the container? So if we expand this now, this is going to fill the container because I set it to fill. And if we set fill on 2 things, they're going to share the available space like this. So quite similar to CSS and flexbox or the stack in SwiftUI, where you can create dynamic layouts and give different things, different behaviors inside that layout constraint.